The objective of finding a wife for Yitzchok is that there should be a continuum, that Avram should have an appropriate successor. So there's no question. Yitzchok is the future patriarch. He's one of the three foundations of Klal Yisrael, Avram to Yaakov. But you're not able to have a patriarch unless there's a matriarch. So the wife has to be qualified to be the matriarch. And we had mentioned that just as Avram himself, his genealogy is classified as Baruch, it's a blessed, he comes from blessed genes, which is Shem. The wife, the matriarch has to have similar genes, has to be Brucha, she has to be blessed. Therefore, Eliezer's daughter, regardless of how devout she was and how holy she was, but in terms of being qualified for a matriarch, she did not make the grade because she came from cursed stock. Because she was from Canaan. Canaan is cursed. You're going to see in a moment that although Avram lived until the age of 175 years, after Yitzchok marries Rivka, there's no mention of Avram any longer. Avram is not mentioned. We only discuss Yitzchok, Rivka. We only discuss Avram when he passes away, where Yitzchok and Yishmael bury their father in the Maris Machpelah. Other than that, there's no mention of Avram. But if Avram is now living till 175 and Yitzchok was married at the age of 40, why isn't any mention? All these years till Avram passes away. In terms of every one of the Avos HaKadoshim, each one contributed to the spiritual profile of Klal Yisrael. Avram is Chesed, Yitzchok is Din, Gvura, Yaakov is Tiferes, is Rachmim. Yaakov is Tam Yisholim. His genealogy manifests itself in every one of his children. The 12 tribes, every one of them had a specific characteristic. All those characteristics were contained within Yaakov. They only expressed themselves in every one of his 12 sons, and together, that was the Klal Yisrael. Once the Av completes contributing to the genealogy of Klal Yisrael, although he lives and exists as who he is and what he is, but his contribution is no longer. Of course, it is the Schusavos, but in terms of his main purpose and function as an Av, Yitzchak takes over now, and Rivki Menu takes over. They are the patriarch and matriarch. As a result of that, there's no need to discuss Avram's life any longer, because we only discuss Avram's life where every aspect of his life is a contributing factor to the genealogy of Klal Yisrael, which he already completed that. So now it's Yitzchok and Rivka. But we find something interesting. Yaakov, he was the patriarch. His parents were alive. His parents were back in Canaan. When he comes back, his mother's no longer alive. Yitzchok is alive. But who's the Av now? The Av and the Emos is Yaakov, Rachel, Leah. Now Yaakov is the contributing factor. He's creating and adding and completing the spiritual profile, the genealogy of Klal Yisrael. And Binyamin, when was Binyamin born? As he crossed in the border into Eretz Yisrael, Rachel Imenu, she passed away in childbirth. That was the 12th son. So the spiritual infrastructure of Klal Yisrael already was in place. Now, of course, until Yaakov passes away, he enhances it. He's protecting it, he's advancing it. But basically, the profile already was established. The 12 sons of Yaakov were born. Before he passes away, he gives a bracha to every one of them to guarantee and to secure that potential, that it should manifest itself based on the potential of each one of his sons. That's the birchos Yaakov. And that's why Yaakov had asked Hashem, illness did not exist until Yaakov. Yaakov is the first human being to become not well, because a person should be able to know to arrange his affairs before he passes away. And Yaakov was fundamental, crucial, that every one of his children should receive the bracha which was necessary to guarantee that whatever his potential was should actually come to fruition. But you say, because Yaakov had this need, the whole illness should introduce to the whole world. If you read about Avram wanted zikna, it wasn't only for himself, that the young should respect the older, because there's what to gain. The Chinuch explains that even a non-Jew, there's a mitzvah to acknowledge a non-Jew, to give him respect. We say, they say tokum, you should acknowledge seva, old age, it's even a non-Jew. Why? So the Chinuch explains that even if a person's not educated, but there's the lessons of life that a person learns just by living a long life, that itself is worthy of acknowledgement. So acknowledge that person because he has what to offer. There's a wellspring to draw from certain lessons of life. So therefore, according to one opinion, even a non-Jew, you have to acknowledge that, or even a non-learned person who's a Jew, because the lessons of life gives him what we call this sage wisdom, which a younger person doesn't have. He learns Torah, that's something else. Even a young person, if he has Torah knowledge, you have to acknowledge him. But a person doesn't have Torah knowledge. If he's young, he's not old, you don't. Because there is what? So Avraham Avinu, when he asked that age should be introduced to the world, it's not only you're able to discern between Yitzchak and Avraham because they looked alike. It's because it's important that the young should acknowledge the older, because the glory of the younger is the older. That's their glory. But over here, when we speak about illness only was important for basically for Yaakov. He had to know exactly when he was going to pass away to give the brachos appropriately. The guarantee, because if the world was created for Reishis Borel Kim, for Yisro Shnika Reishis, and for Torah Shnika Reishis, Klaus would have to have the wherewithal to be able to receive the Torah at Sinai. So that bracha was crucial. But what about the rest of the world? The answer is, they're also beneficiaries. A person should set his affairs in order before he dies to leave his last will and testament. Therefore, when he becomes not well, he starts thinking about when he's going to pass away. Otherwise, he doesn't think about these things. So they're also, but you don't have to go that far. You could say, since the value of existence is Klal Yisrael, and Klal Yisrael is Yaakov and his children, so the brachos to Yaakov's aware, and he's alerted when to give those brachos. So the whole world is based on Klal Yisrael. Whatever they have is only due to Klal Yisrael. As we said, the Gemara says in Sukkah that the Ayim Purim, the 70 bulls that are brought on Sukkos, that all the sustenance that comes to the world comes through those 70 bulls which Klal Yisrael bring in the base of Mikdash on their behalf. So all the bracha, what we call the shefa bracha, all the channels of bracha that comes to the world comes through Klal Yisrael. But Klal Yisrael are only able to activate those sources only because of who we are. Therefore, Yaakov, being aware when he has to give the brachos, the illness which is introduced, the whole world, that's once it's introduced to him, all humanity are impacted. But he said it's not fair, it's a diminishment. We're being diminished. That's not, it doesn't, but that diminishment, that allows you to be beneficiaries of what you should have. Besides, we had said, according to Ravina Bachya, when Avram was given the bracha that he explains over there, and he explains the pasuk in Hallel, which is pasuk in Tilim, that Halu Hashem kol goyim shamhu kolim ki govar aleinu chasdo. All the nations will praise and extol Hashem because the Chesed Hashem has overwhelmed us. So the question is, if it would say because it's overwhelmed them, Okay, that's where they praise Hashem, because it's overwhelmed Klal Yisrael. So Rabbeinu Bach explains, all the nations in the world who blessed through you means that all bracha that comes to this existence, the conduit is Klal Yisrael. And Hashem gives an abundance of chesed, which is so overwhelming, we don't have the capacity to retain it all. So the overflow goes to the nations of the world. Therefore, they praise Hashem and extol Him, because we're overwhelmed with the chesed. We don't have the capacity to retain it all. Therefore, they're all the nations are the beneficiaries of the chesed. So if that's the case, but why are we qualified to be the receptacle to receive that chesed? The answer is because Yaakov blessed his children. If he wouldn't have blessed his children and they weren't able to meet certain standards of capacity, that bracha, we wouldn't be qualified to be that conduit. The world wouldn't be qualified to receive that level of bracha. Therefore, it's not at the world's expense. Klal Yisrael is receiving the bracha. They are the direct beneficiaries of that bracha. Nations of the world understood the value of the Beis Hamikdash, to what degree the beneficiaries, that all the bracha comes through those 70 bulls, they would have surrounded the Beis Hamikdash with legions of soldiers to protect it. It's more than Fort Knox for them. But not only did they not protect it, they destroyed it. But as a result of that, they are actually the victims of their own victimization of the Jewish people by destroying the Beis Hamikdash. They're not aware to any degree what our value is, because if they understood our value and what we do versus ourselves, even the 70, we have an obligation to bring the 70. They correspond to the 70 nations of the world, the 70 bulls. But factually, when we bring that, we flick switches which turn on all the energies of the world flow because of those 70 bulls. What do? They destroy the system which generates that flow of energy. So who are the victims? They victimize themselves by destroying the Beis Hamikdash. But it continues. It's still Bereshis Bar Elokim. If Klal Yisrael would not continue learning Torah, it wouldn't be a continuous infusion of Torah in the world would not exist. So ultimately, they're all beneficiaries directly of our function. But we only have our function only because Yaakov gave the bracha to his children. So the illness that they were actually affected negatively, that illness is crucial for them to be beneficiaries of the bracha.
I guess, so how?
Yeah, the teenage nishba. A child was taken captive as an infant, and he's raised among non-Jews. He doesn't even know he's Jewish. Now, how is he supposed to address his spirituality? And the Mishnah in Shabbos speaks about a case. Later in life, he finds out he was a Jew, so he never observed the Shabbos. He still has to bring a sin offering. Because factually, the discussion, how many sin offerings does he have to bring? For every Shabbos he didn't observe, or one for all the Shabbos that he did not keep? Okay? But what does he have to bring? What does he have to bring a chatos? What does he have to bring a sin offering? There was no way he could have known, right? What about a person? You go into a restaurant in Israel or in the United States, you have the best certification on the wall, and it turns out it's counterfeit. And the food you ate was not kosher. Do you have to do tshuva? You did your due diligence, it's research, and the Rosh Yeshiva of your son's yeshiva in Israel said that's where you eat. And it turns out all the food all the years was not kosher. You have to do tshuva. Why? Inadvertent means you should have been more careful. I couldn't have been more careful. The answer is if a person ingests something in the physical sense, which is tainted, do you get sick? Whether you know about it or not, doesn't make a difference. In terms of the spiritual makeup of a Jew, if you allow certain things to enter into that system, it disrupts the system, and the system malfunctions. Now, of course, if you do certain things deliberately, it creates a greater malfunctioning, because it creates a greater level of diminishment of that entity called neshama. But if you do it inadvertently, it's inadvertent. Nobody forced it on you. Nobody forced it down your throat. You chose to eat. So therefore, it's not classified as ones, it's classified as shogi. Inadvertent. Once it's inadvertent, the action is attributed to you. It has nothing to do with intent. Factually, you ingested something which is detrimental to your spirituality. If that's the case, you're affected. Now the question is, why? The Gemara says in Gittin, Hashem does not allow, takola means a pitfall, something negative to happen even to the animal of tzaddikim. So for the tzaddik himself, definitely, the tzaddik will merit a certain shmira. Hashem will not allow that tzaddik even to be victimized by this inadvertency, not being aware that something's wrong. Hashem will watch him that he shouldn't cross those lines, even unbeknown to him. So if Hashem allows you to cross those lines, it means you don't have the worthiness for that spiritual protection not to do it. Okay? This tinik shen nishba, for whatever reason, that neshama did not merit the protection, and therefore it has to go through certain situations, and it has to be diminished. If it comes, what about that person never ever realizes till he dies that he's a Jew? Factually, that neshama was impacted at a minimal level, but it was impacted negatively. How Hashem squares it away? Was that neshama ever here before? Did it ever exist before? Only God knows. And sometimes the soul has to experience certain things in this world in terms of the total picture, which is called Klal Yisrael. There's a word from the Ramchal. You know, the Gemara tells us, we say, Gamzu L'tova. Whatever happens, we say, it's for the best. What it means is for the best, because the Gemara tells of a story. There was a person who was a Rebbe of Rebbe Akiva. His name was Nochum. And Nochum, anything happened in his life, everything was Gamzu L'tova. That's the way he lived his life. It's for the best. So the Ramchal explains in one of his works, Gamzu L'tova doesn't mean that a person goes and he wants to make an investment and then he's denied the investment. And then years later, he realizes that if he would have made that investment, which he believed was the basis for his non-success, it would have destroyed him totally. So later he realizes it was a bracha that Hashem did not allow him to get involved in that investment. That's Gamzu L'tova. It is to a degree. Turns out for the best. He said that's not the real understanding of Gamzu L'tova. He says there's a continuum called Klal Yisrael. The world started at a certain point and ends at another point. The world, this is the Ramchal's words, the world has to reach a level of shleimus. Shleimus, a perfect level. Many events have to happen. Each one of us is a small speck in the spectrum called Klal Yisrael, which spans history. So every one of our experiences, whatever happens to us, we're part of that mosaic called Klal Yisrael. And we're a little piece, we're a little chip. And all these chips, whatever we experience, even though in the chip itself, it seems to be negative or horrific, but ultimately that will enhance the total mosaic. So Gamzu L'tova means it's not possible to know. It's only Gamzu L'tova in terms of the totality of Klal Yisrael. This had to be, because in the terms of the totality, it's the ultimate level of being beneficial. That's the Ramchal. So all these tinik, whatever it is, all the calculations, why things have to be the way they are, it's impossible to know. Because everything's taken into account, every action of every Jew at every level, the rises and falls and the Holocaust and the successes, whatever we had, is all part of this profile. At the end of the day, whenever Mashiach comes, when Hashem's going to pull the plug at 6,000 years, the world will be at a level of shleimus. And at that time, what happens to Esav? At the end of the day, all evil will be expunged from this existence. And who represents evil? Lishmor Har Esav. That's Esav. Esav son of Yaakov. He is the problem. That's Amalek. They will be obliterated from existence. Then the world will reach shleimus, this complete level. So every event that happens throughout history is a piece itching up to that shleimus, which we don't understand, and that's all Gamzu L'tova. That's for the best.
I'm sorry to, I have one more, Ernie.
If you're force-fed non-kosher, do you need any level of atonement? The answer is no. Torah says, onus rachmana patre, something which is beyond your ability. It's not attributed to you. There's a famous word from Lev Simcha Dvinsky asks a contradiction in the Rambam. The Rambam says, and it's based on the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that a Jew has to give his life for Gilei Arai Shvichas Damim Avodah Zarah. Normally, if there's a question of your life or violating the Torah, life takes precedence over the Torah. It trumps the Torah. But when it comes to three cardinal sins, we say, Yehoreg Val Yavo, you have to give your life. Okay? And if you give your life, what are you a violation of? What do you, it's called Kiddush Hashem. And if you don't give your life, what did you violate? Chil Hashem. Okay? Now, a person is not permitted to take a life to save your own life. And a person says, you want to live? You should kill this man. And if not, we're going to kill you. So the man says, I want to live. He says, then you better pull the trigger. And they have a gun on his head. And if he doesn't pull the trigger, they pull the trigger. And he pulls the trigger, they take the gun away from his head. And he was forewarned. The one who pulled the trigger ultimately was forewarned. If you pull the trigger, you're going to be violating a Torah law because you're obligated to forfeit your life. Is he liable for the death penalty? What would you say? You were supposed to give your life. You're forewarned. If you don't give your life, you're in violation of Torah that you did not give your life. Are you liable for death penalty? The Rambam says you're not liable for the death penalty. Why? Because what did you violate? You didn't violate the law of Lo Tirtzach. You committed murder. You violated the law of not sanctifying God's name. You desecrated God's name. For the desecration of God's name, you're not liable for the death penalty. But you committed murder. The murder that he committed, that action is not attributed to himself. It's only due to an external force which forced him to do that action. Torah says whenever something is caused by an external force, it's attributed to that person, not to you. Therefore, there's no accountability. But nevertheless, Torah says, even though there's no accountability, if you did it, but being a Jew, you should have forfeited your life. So you violated Chil Hashem. For Chil Hashem, for desecrating God's name, you're not liable for the death penalty. That's the Rambam. That's one Rambam. Good. So when anything is attributed to an external force, it doesn't identify with you as if you did the action. And that's what Ramchal says. Why did Hashem have to create a person with all the challenges of life? A person should naturally do the right thing. See, he says, because if a person would not be challenged, and it's only his own initiative which brings about things, he wouldn't be deserving of reward. Because the reason why he's doing the right thing is because he's programmed to do the right thing. So it's not due to his own initiative. It's due to an external force which allows him to do the right thing. Therefore, he would not be the beneficiary of his actions because his actions are not attributed to himself. That's the Ramchal. So now there's another Rambam. The Rambam says, person goes to a doctor, and doctor says, if you want to live, you have to bow down to this idol because it has a certain force, energy, and that energy will allow you to recover. Okay? And he hears it well, and he wants to live. And people become aware of it. They warn him, they forewarn him, say, if you bow to that idol, you can be liable for the death penalty because that's considered idolatry. So he says, but if I don't bow, I'm going to die. And he goes, and they forewarn him, he bows, he's put to death. Over there, his life, and he's the reason why he's doing it, he's compelled because he'll die otherwise. Rambam rules, there he's put to death. So Rameir Simcha says, how do we reconcile it? Here, it's onus, he has no choice. And there it's onus. If you want to live, you have to bow to the idol. So why in one situation are you in violation of idolatry? The other, you're only in violation of Chil Hashem, which does not carry the death penalty. That's the question Rameir Simcha asks. So he answers that in the case where you're forced by an external force, by a person, either you kill or be killed, either you bow or you will be killed. The reason why you're bowing is attributed to the external force. Over here, if you want to live, you take the initiative to bow. That action is attributed to you. It's not attributed to anybody else. As a result of that, that's the reason why you have liability. Because it's your action. You chose to live. And it's only you, nobody else. It's your own personal predicament which initiates your decision to bow. That's how Ramesh Simcha reconciles the two Rambams. So if something is an external force, it has no relevance to you. If it's the circumstance, and there's no external force other than your predicament, and you make a decision, that decision is your decision. Therefore, you have full responsibility. Okay, so let's talk. The wall falling down, the one who owns the wall. One who owns the wall. He maintained that wall. Now there's an external force which causes that wall to fall over. Okay? Even though he owns those stones are not, he has no relevance to that. He has no liability for that. The Torah says you only have liability if you failed as a responsible person. A wind comes, blows it over. Or there's no way to know that the stones had a weak foundation because there was some shifting of the soil. It has nothing to do with you. What about the person who's the victim? But why did Hashem allow you to be the victim? It's like a person's walking trips and he breaks his leg. Because Hashem decreed this person should break his leg. Hashem wanted this person should take a financial hit, should become a damagee. But that's unrelated to the person who's owned the stones. Because that wall falling over has nothing to do with the person who owns those stones. Therefore, there's no liability. If he does an action, there's no way he could have known that he caused the shift and that caused the wall to fall over. He's held liable. Because ultimately, his action caused that. But if it's unrelated to his action, then that's called onus. Onus doesn't identify with the person. As we said, even when it comes to idolatry, as a murderer or as an idolater. The bracha. So why did he have the bracha right? Well, because he said, I'm going to die. So the Sephron over there explains that before a person dies, or he's within that period, the neshama already starts detaching from the physicality of the person. And a bracha that comes from a more spiritual being has greater value than when the neshama is embedded in the physicality of a person. And since the neshama already is detaching, the bracha is a more effective bracha. And he says, therefore, you find all these people, before they died, they gave brachas, because that's the ultimate moment to give the bracha, because the person is most spiritual at that moment. That's the Sephardim. So here, Yaakov, especially, Yaakov was the most special of all the Avos, of all the patriarchs. He fathered the 12 tribes. So the destiny of Klal Yisrael is based on this bracha which he's going to give. It's essentially should know when exactly he's going to die. He has to be alerted. Not only that, he should give the bracha, because at that moment, he's at the neshama is already at the detachment level. When it's detaching, that's the ultimate moment to give the bracha. It's going to be a more effective bracha. And that's what he says. Gather Bnei Yaakov to receive my bracha before I die. He makes it a point over there. That's what he says. Because only then the neshama, the person's almost totally spiritual, and at that moment the bracha really it takes on such a level of value and permanence. It's the maximum level of bracha.
Very good. So
every human being is given choice. Hitler, Yimach Shmo V'Zichro, had a choice. He didn't have to be the personification of evil. He didn't have to be that. When Amalek attacked us after Kriyas Yamsuf, he had a choice to attack or not to attack. He chose to act on that inclination, which he could have restrained himself. He could have restrained himself. He chose not to. But everything he did was based on his choice. What, as he say, the way you make your bed, that's the way you sleep. The way you live your life, that's the way you pay the price. Because you didn't have to live your life that way. And every human being is in a position that it's not predestined they should be evil. And that's the Gemara. Everything's predestined except Yerushalayim. That's even for the non-Jew. Even the non-Jew is not destined. He must be evil. Doesn't have to be that. As a result of that, what am I going to give you? A thank you?
So why do we suffer? Why do we suffer then? Because of what
why do we suffer?
Their choice. Yeah, we're suffering because of Molech.
It's interesting.
And Hitler.
Very simple. You cannot be vulnerable unless there's a basis for that vulnerability. We sinned, we speak about communal responsibility. Why did God choose Midas Adin at that point? But whatever happened is because we were culpable. So you have a question why we were culpable. Why were the tzaddikim, the million children that were murdered by them, why were they culpable? Right? We don't have all the answers how to exactly adjust the system, how reward and punishment works. We speak about the totality of Klal Yisrael. We speak about communal responsibility. At that moment in history, Hashem pulled the plug. That Hitler would have wanted to destroy the Jews earlier. But it's not up to him. As much as you want to destroy the Jews, if God doesn't allow you, you can't do it. At that point, because of our vulnerabilities of spirituality, we needed a correction. Therefore, God gave Hitler the ability to act on what he chose to do. But if we weren't deserving of that, as much as he wanted to do it, he couldn't have done it.
You always mention, Rabbi, how Moshe Rabbeinu kept Dustin and Aviram around. He could have killed him any time, could have sentenced him to punishment. But he, in a sense, had a Koros HaTov. Because of the way Dustin and Aviram were, Moshe became Moshe.
Correct. That's the Midrash.
Right.